A couple of days ago, I saw a video by the creator Clicks Money talking about a hardware wallet. A day or so later, while I was doing some mind-numbing tasks and left with my thoughts, I began thinking about building a similar contraption that would allow cold storage without the need for a hardware wallet. I've actually used a system similar to the concept I'm about to lay out in the past, with an unencrypted SD card only plugged into a device running a cold copy of Puppy Linux. Today though, I'm going to demonstrate a cold system that can have cold encrypted storage, regular non-cold encrypted storage, and unencrypted data all together that can create wallets, sign transactions, and perform completely unrelated computer tasks as well. I suck at explaining things, but I suck slightly less at demonstrating things, so I figured I'd jump straight in and show you exactly what I'm talking about. By the time you've watched the video, you should have a better understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish than you do now. That said, however, the basics of what we're going to do is install a cold operating system onto a thumb drive and use that software to then create cold and non-cold storage on a different thumb drive using encryption to protect the cold storage from other devices. So, step 1 is to buy 2 thumb drives. Just to be clear, if you know what you're doing, you can very much deviate from the plan I'm about to lay out. I'm just laying out what I would personally do and what I think is the best way to set this up. Anyway, back to the instructions. Get your 2 thumb drives and format them on your standard computer. One of them should be at least 16 gig and the second one is entirely dependent on how much you actually want to store on it. Beginning with step 2, start by downloading Debian Linux or the operating system of your choice on your normal computer. Next, prepare the installation. Most likely you will be using either DVDs or CDs or tools such as Rufus for thumb drives. Either way, get the installation media all set up and shut down your computer. Now, this is a good time to note that there are a lot of good guides on installing an operating system such as Debian, though it should be fairly straightforward and I'll make sure to give you a basic overview. Your next step is to start up your computer and tell it to boot from the installation media, which usually involves pressing something along the lines of F2 as your computer starts to get you to BIOS, which then allows you to choose which device you boot from. Choose the first thumb drive, the one that should be at least 16 gig, and plug it into your computer. Now, follow through with the installation, however, you need to make sure of a few things. First of all, be absolutely sure that you select the installation location as the thumb drive and not your computer's hard drive. Secondly, when installing the OS, make sure to encrypt the installation, that way the installation cannot be maliciously modified without the encryption password. Finally, make sure that you never connect the system to the internet during or after this installation. Here's a quick clip showing me installing Debian Linux on a virtual machine. Recording on a virtual machine is way easier for me to do this than trying to record it on some setup like I'm explaining. However, the only major difference between this and installing to a thumb drive is that I'm installing to a virtual hard disk instead of a thumb drive. Once the installation is complete, shut down your device, unplug your thumb drive, which we will be calling the system thumb drive from now on, and reboot your computer normally. Also, it's best to keep it unplugged and only plug it in when your computer is shut down and you plan to boot onto the new secure system that you just created. The goal is to keep a potentially infected computer from messing with the drive, though again, since we encrypted the installation, an infected computer would be pretty limited in what it could do. For step 3, reboot your computer normally and begin to download some software. For this tutorial, using the system to provide cold Bitcoin storage, I will need 2 pieces of software, Vercrypt and Electrum. Though of course, if you have different plans for a system, you could always include different software. For example, if you wanted to use a system for cold storage and for signing PGP/GPG signatures, you would want software for those specific uses as well. Now back to the thumb drives. Set the system thumb drive aside and grab the second one. Format that and copy over any applicable files to the thumb drive. As you can see in my screenshot, I have a few files that should represent what you may want to copy over at this stage. Family.jpg represents files such as sentimental photos, ebooks, music, or whatever else you might want to keep on the system, but that it is not important to keep secure from malicious actors. Hell, you may have even posted your most sentimental photos to social media, but storing those things are important to you, or that can keep you entertained, but that won't need any sort of special security. Additionally, files such as taxes.docx represents things that might need a certain level of security, but not necessarily cold storage. These things, such as tax-related documents, passwords to services, scans of identification, or other important things that you may want to avoid leaving unencrypted on a thumb drive, especially if it leaves your home, don't truly warrant the hassle of cold storage. Finally, there's the file called diary.txt, which will act as a decoy, but more information on that later. Finally, the 2 pieces of software that are included in the screenshot are pretty self-explanatory. From now on, I will call this the data thumb drive. Shut down your computer, leave the data thumb drive plugged in, and plug in the system thumb drive and boot your computer using the system thumb drive. So, I apologize, it's the next day and it seems that the data center that hosted Vercrypt has gone down in a fire, which is probably why I could not access the site last night. I could try assembling the software from source code, or I could be lazy and show you how as I pretend to be on such a system, so I will link 2 links in the description, one on how to install Vercrypt on Debian Linux, and one on how to use Electrum in cold storage. Additionally, I'll also record the creation of 2 encrypted file containers on a Windows installation that already had Vercrypt installed, which should explain the structure of the 2 encrypted file containers that I've been talking about. So first step is to move the Vercrypt and Electrum installation files from the data thumb drive to the system thumb drive and install them. Next, run Vercrypt and create an encrypted file container. Right now we are going to create the first of 2 file containers, one which will be cold storage and one which will be a standard encrypted file, starting with the latter. We can now start organizing the files on the data drive. Move any files that you want to be encrypted but do not need in cold storage into the file container that you just created. The logic here is that certain data is important enough that you want to avoid somebody from getting access to it by physically stealing the device, but not important enough to deal with the hassle of cold storage. Using the setup, whenever you're on your computer, whether it be the system thumb drive or just your standard computer, you can enter the password and mount your file container to access those important files that do not require cold storage, but somebody without your password cannot access them even if they have physical access to the thumb drive. This, however, won't do for cold storage. Here's a quick clip of me setting up the file container that I just mentioned now, the encrypted file container that is not cold storage. Next, we are going to create a second encrypted file that will act as our cold storage. Notice, however, that this time I created a hidden partition that will act as a decoy. If you ever need to enter your decoy password, you get the decoy files, and there's no way for an attacker to know whether you're accessing the decoy or the regular files. Create it, copy your decoy files over first, and then finish creating and mounting the hidden partition. Now that you have a cold storage container, I feel it is important to remind you that this is for, well, cold storage. Even though you can open the other file container on any computer that you feel is safe, this cold storage file should only be opened on the operating system on your system thumb drive. Also, remember that you can name your encrypted file containers anything that you want. I'm just labeling them this for demonstration purposes. Now, here is when you would want to create your Bitcoin wallets on the cold storage encrypted file container. Since I'm not really looking to create a Bitcoin transaction as part of this wallet tutorial, and since some of the software is down anyway, I'll just leave you with an FAQ from Electrum in the description as a link. Finally, for the final step of this, take your data thumb drive and start backing it up. Even though encryption prevents others from accessing the data, if it is ever lost, stolen, or damaged, and that is the only copy of the data that you have, well then you've lost it. Therefore, make sure to have ample backups of the data on this thumb drive. The system thumb drive is much less important since you can always install a new cold installation on a new thumb drive as long as the data on the data thumb drive is still there. So now, what can you use this system for? Well, what you do with it now is completely up to you, but I thought I'd share a few examples of what you could use it for. If you were some sort of prepper with a bug out bag, or not necessarily a prepper but did have a FEMA/Red Cross style go bag, then it might be useful to throw this in there. Also, if you regularly carry around a laptop in a backpack or a messenger bag, it might be a convenient way to store your Bitcoin and keep it on you. And finally, this could be the kind of thing where you just use it to keep your Bitcoin secure, safe, and at home. Oh, and a bonus tip. If you do end up carrying it around, you can always attach it, some thumb drive at least, to a necklace or a chain. It's not exactly my style to wear, but hey, you know, it is kind of a neat concept to think that you could have all your important data and tens of thousands of dollars of Bitcoin just around your neck. Oh, and bonus points too, if it's actually something of a gold chain. You know, you got $10,000 in Bitcoin and a gold chain worth $3,000 around your neck, and I don't know, if you're running from the law, that might be a useful thing to have or something like that. I don't actually condone running from the law. I'm just kind of rambling on. Of course, I'm a peasant, so the screenshot you're going to see is definitely not going to be a gold chain. But anyway, just a thought. Now that I have the system laid out, I'd like to quickly discuss the pros and cons of such a system, as well as the security benefits and risks. What we did here is create an air-gapped system, that is, a system that does not connect to the internet at any point or allow important data on the system to be accessed unencrypted by another system that is connected to the internet, but at the same time does communicate with a system that is connected to the internet through removable media, in this case a thumb drive. However, since this was created with the idea of a cold storage Bitcoin wallet, I will compare it against a hardware wallet. The cons of the system compared to a hardware wallet is the following. First of all, this system is a bit clunky. It takes a bit to set up compared to a hardware wallet. And secondly, brute forcing is possible. Generally speaking, it's easier to brute force an encrypted file than it is to brute force a physical PIN entry. And finally, this system is not bulletproof. It is possible for an air-gapped system to be successfully attacked. Usually it involves attacking the online system and using it to place malicious code on the device, transferring data between the devices, only to have the cold system infected by that software. Now, such an attack is hard, especially when the two devices are different operating systems, and generally speaking, it has to be a fine-tuned attack specifically designed for that specific setup. No random accidental viruses are likely to do this, but theoretically it is still an attack vector. This system, however, does have some pros over a hardware wallet, which includes the ability to have longer passwords. Instead of just creating a PIN, you can have a much longer password protecting this. You're using tried and true software, which, unlike a hardware wallet that needs to be reinvented from the ground up using all new hardware and software, this system uses very well-known open source software, which should be much less likely to have some sort of hidden vulnerability pop up. Next, you can easily back this up. Unlike a hardware wallet, this system can be easily duplicated. Copying the encrypted storage to cloud storage or sending it to a friend's house is a lot easier than sending around a written seed phrase or buying several hardware wallets. Next, it's much cheaper to buy two thumb drives than it is to buy most hardware wallets. You get a lot more flexibility. You can do just about anything that an offline computer can do with this setup, and you also have other forms of storage on this system as well, unlike a hardware wallet, which is generally just Bitcoin or just a list of cryptocurrencies. And finally, this system has no attacks straight from the internet. A hardware wallet has a firewall of sorts that prevents any sort of communication between the PC and itself except for a few minor exceptions, such as transmitting transactions and receiving updates. Yes, updates straight from the internet. Yes, they are most likely cryptographically verified, but you could have said the same thing about Windows, and well, that didn't stop attackers from spoofing a signature and attacking Windows with fake updates. And there's no guarantee that somebody, be it an employee or a hacker, with access to the keys intentionally signs and pushes out malicious updates. So, now I have you paranoid, right? Both this system and a hardware wallet both have attack vectors, Well, you could always buy a laptop, install software on it, and then never connect it to the internet or attach removable media to it and manually type out transactions and confirmations or use QR codes. Still though, there's always physical surveillance, VANEC radiation, and the dreaded $5 wrench attack. So yeah, to be clear, nothing is ever truly 100% secure, and this is not a knock on hardware wallets, but instead a thought experiment that I just ended up making a video on. Well, I guess that's everything. I appreciate you watching to the end. I enjoy building systems like this, but this took a lot longer than expected. I'm glad to have this video done and taken care of. Anyway, thanks for watching. And be sure to check the description for the links I mentioned.